Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Brainy Bunch. My name is Vish, and on this week's episode, I'm going to be doing something a little bit different, although I'm sure the title of this episode already gave it away. Anyways, this week's episode is called A Trip to Rehab, and you guessed it, I'm at a rehab center for mental health and addiction. And I'm here to talk to some people who lived and or are living with a mental health issue to understand how they experience life and some ways to help cope with what they're dealing with. On this episode, you'll be hearing 4 new voices. Why don't you guys go ahead and give yourself a quick introduction?
Hey everyone, my name is Pavan.
Hey guys, my name is Vani.
Hi guys, my name is Preeti.
Hey guys, I'm Ashna.
Alright, I'll let you guys do the talking now. Up first, we have Pavan talking about her experiences with schizophrenia.
So I'd like to start off by explaining what schizophrenia is. For those of you that don't know, schizophrenia is a long-term mental disorder that affects a person's ability to think as well as change their emotions and the way they behave. And living with schizophrenia has had a big impact on my life.
How so?
Well, for starters, some of my symptoms and episodes started to interfere with my everyday life.
What kind of symptoms do you experience?
One of my biggest symptoms would be my hallucinations. A hallucination is like a false perception of something that's not really happening or that's not really there. My hallucinations consist of seeing people that aren't actually around me.
Do you hear voices as like a part of your hallucinations, or is it just seeing people?
I sometimes hear voices of people talking to me, but that's called a delusion, which is like separate from a hallucination.
So they're like false beliefs?
Yeah, exactly.
You also talked about having episodes earlier on. What exactly happens during one of those episodes?
Well, when I have an episode, that can also be known as episodes of psychosis, because what happens during them is that I have a loss of touch with reality. My behavior and emotions change completely. I usually become confused and don't understand or can't comprehend what's going on around me. And during an episode is when I would usually have most of my hallucinations.
And how did this have an impact on your life?
My symptoms made it difficult for me to complete tasks while I was at work, which is why I wasn't able to keep the same job for a long period of time up until now.
But shouldn't your workplace have accommodations for you so that you can work effectively?
They should. I think every workplace should take into consideration the health of their employees and take action to help them complete their job to the best of their ability. But the problem is that some don't, or they don't know how to help their employees, which is why if you're facing any sort of mental illness, you should talk to your employer or boss about changing certain things to help you work more effectively.
Yeah, you should. Just have a conversation with them and be like, hey, I'm facing this problem and I was wondering if you can help. Because it's most likely that they will listen to you and help you with whatever issue you're facing.
So Pavan, how does your current employees help you while you're at your workplace?
Well, when I first started working, I worked in a relatively large area with other people always around. And then work would sometimes be stressful, and sometimes the loud noises and the messy workplace used to trigger my episodes. And the stress would also increase my symptoms. I talked to my supervisor about this, and he moved me to a smaller enclosed space to work on my own, and he also provided me with work organizers so I could have a tidy workplace. A while after, I noticed that my episodes became less frequent.
That's so good. Is there anything else your workplace did to help you complete your work effectively?
Yeah, there is one other thing. They provided me with a psychiatric dog for comfort while working. This was actually the best thing that my employers did for me because it helped a lot. The dog, whose name is Sam, helped me with many things like reminding me to take medication and relieve my stress sometimes as he's always ready to play. Sam was also trained to provide hallucination discernment for me, which was the most helpful thing he did.
Hold on, what's hallucination discernment?
It's basically providing comfort and a sense of judgment while someone's having hallucinations. So alerting individuals of their surroundings and what's actually going on, or stopping individuals from doing something harmful when they're experiencing hallucinations.
So what role does Sam play in providing comfort?
Well, since during my hallucinations I see people that aren't actually around, Sam was trained to let me know when someone comes near me and also when someone's talking to me. So it helped me differentiate my hallucinations from reality.
Wow, that's really cool. And it's nice to know that you have all this help while you're at work. I'm sure your experiences have given reassurance to other individuals living with schizophrenia that are worried about working. The important thing is to remember that if you're at work and you ever need help with anything, it's important to tell someone so they can help you.
That's right, and make sure to seek help whenever you need it. I'm sure many people will be willing to help.
Thanks for sharing, Pavan. Now we have Vani sharing her story with mental health. So how are you doing today, Vani?
I'm good. Thanks for asking. How about yourself?
I'm great. Why don't you tell us about your struggles with mental health?
Well, I've been dealing with social anxiety for about 8 years of my life. I went to seek help recently and it has helped me a lot.
What was the most difficult time in your life dealing with social anxiety?
The most difficult time I had dealing with social anxiety would have to be when I was in high school, so I was 16 at the time.
Why or how was social anxiety the most difficult time in your life during high school?
In high school specifically, it was extremely hard as there were a lot of classes where I had to interact with my peers, and majority of my classes included a lot of participation, such as answering questions and asking questions, and I wasn't comfortable doing that. There was also a lot of group work, which I really dreaded because I hated talking to people and interacting with them in general.
Why were you not comfortable participating in class, if you don't mind me asking?
I was not comfortable participating in class because I was always worried of either sounding really silly or getting a question wrong. Let's say either of those things did happen, then I would feel really embarrassed to the point where I would have panic attacks or stumble on my words.
Wow, that's a lot to take in.
Yes, it is. You also mentioned that you don't like talking to people or interacting with them. Was it any specific reason to that?
I hated interacting with my peers because I felt as though they would be judging me in their heads and I would get extremely embarrassed just talking to them. I wouldn't know what to say to them and I hated every second of talking to them as I always felt like I was getting judged in a negative way.
Did you ever get any help in school at all, or that any of the viewers that may be facing the same thing you did receive as well?
Well, no one in high school actually knew I had social anxiety, as I was diagnosed with it after high school. However, there were some classes where the teacher would pair students up, and it prevented me from being left out, as I didn't really talk to anyone. It avoided the whole thing where students would pick their partners, and there would be 2 kids left who weren't in the group, and then everyone stares at them, and all of a sudden they're put into a random group.
Thanks for sharing, Bonnie. Introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Preeti and I've been dealing with social anxiety all throughout my teenage years and now.
Tell us about your high school years.
My high school days used to be one long days of loneliness since I had no friends at school. I always arrived early because I was afraid of being late to class since I couldn't not stand walking in late and having everyone look at me. Since I arrived early, the teacher would often pass by. I kept my head down so I wouldn't have to say hi to each other. During in class, I'll do the same thing with the teachers in hope that he would not ask me any questions. During lunch, I would usually sit alone or sit with a group of people that I used to know and nothing in common anymore.
How do you interact with other individuals?
Okay. Sometimes someone would ask me a question, as usually I would start to panic and feel my heart start to race and the words will get caught in my throat.
How do you manage outside of school?
Outside of school, I'm not really involved in activities. I don't have a part-time job like as most other because I'm too afraid to apply or go to an interview. I spend my most nights and weekends at home reading or doing my homework. I usually get embarrassed to talk to people the way I was feeling.
What were you mainly afraid of?
It was pretty ironic that the reason I cannot talk to anyone because I'm afraid of people.
Did you seek for help from anyone?
After high school was over, I started getting and still do seek help from a psychologist and receive therapy now. I recently started taking a pill which helps the symptoms of anxiety slow down the central nerve system. It has helped me to calm myself when I'm getting anxious around people since I started working at an office where I would have to interact with my colleagues. Working in this type of environment has helped me out slowly overcoming my fear of able to talking to new people.
Okay, so next we have Ashna. Introduce yourself when you're ready.
Hi, I'm Ashna and I'm a military veteran and I've lived with PTSD for the past 3 years, but a couple months ago I had a treatment that really helped me a lot.
If you don't mind me asking, what did you experience that caused PTSD?
Yeah, that's completely fine. One of my treatments was actually to be accepting of what happened and learn to talk about it when I felt comfortable. I won't go too into detail, but it was just an accumulation of things that happened, but it was mostly just losing the people and friends that I made and also being so isolated from everyone I knew back home. It really took its toll and kind of amplified all the loss around me.
How long did you serve?
2 years. I went straight out of high school.
What made you leave? Was it because of your PTSD?
Actually, no. I think when I was actually there, I was too busy and I had too many things to do that I didn't even have time to think about it. And I think I just didn't want to think about it. So once I got home, it was like, what else could I do? I spent 2 years of my life there. I couldn't just pretend that it didn't happen.
Did you ever do that? Pretend like it didn't happen? I know it's a common symptom, denying that it ever happened.
Yeah, I have heard that too.
Not really. Before I left, I knew that it was a possibility that it could happen. And once I got home, I thought after everything that maybe it wouldn't, but that wasn't the case at all.
What made you think it was PTSD at first?
Well, my first and my most prominent symptom was the nightmares. I couldn't sleep at night. Like, all I thought of was the sounds and the screams, and it was daily noises during the day that just reminded me of it, like the noises of the fans on stoves and ceiling fans and the kids screaming at playgrounds. I suffered a lot of panic attacks and just started shaking. My parents were the first ones to suggest that it could have been PTSD, and that's when it kind of just clicked.
So you said you received a treatment that really helped. What was that treatment?
The treatment that really helped me was called imagery rehearsal therapy. So as I said before, I really struggled with the nightmares and I got in about my time there. So imagery rehearsal therapy is when I stay awake and change the ending of my nightmare. And I keep repeating that in my head over and over. This really helped me because in my nightmares, it was always the same ending, like seeing my friends die and not being able to do anything. And it was the same thing over. So with imagery rehearsal therapy, I could change that to where I could accept what happened and come to terms with it. I started my first session a couple months ago, and I can really see the difference it made in my life. Now the everyday normal sounds don't trigger anything anymore. It's like I can finally live my life again.
Before we conclude the podcast, I'd like to address the effects defense mechanisms may have on individuals living with mental disorders.
What do defense mechanisms have to do with schizophrenia?
Well, to begin with, a defense mechanism is a subconscious tool used to help relieve anxiety and stress levels.
Can you give an example of defense mechanism?
Of course, there are many types of defense mechanisms, but one of the most common defense mechanisms used is denial.
How does an individual use denial?
Well, to relate to schizophrenia, a patient living with the disorder will most likely be prescribed certain pills and medication to help with the symptoms caused by schizophrenia. If a patient becomes resistant to taking medication constantly, they may begin lying to the doctor by saying the medication is working, when in reality it's not. This is a form of denial because the patient is lying to the doctor while subconsciously hoping to relieve stress and anxiety.
What about social anxiety?
Like you explained earlier, you said you would sometimes feel embarrassed just by speaking to your peers. These events will obviously cause anxiety and stress levels to rise. So a defense mechanism would usually be used. A defense mechanism will usually be used to relieve those stress levels.
What defense mechanisms could be used by an individual living with social anxiety?
Well, a common defense mechanism that could be used is repression or suppression. Essentially what happens is the brain acts to keep out any thoughts, memories, or emotions from the conscious awareness about the certain event that caused stress and anxiety. You're basically trying to forget everything and move on, which can show short-term benefits as it helps relieve your anxiety and stress. But in some cases, repression may lead to long-term problems that may affect other encounters or events in the future. Luckily, you're here talking about it, which can help ensure that you do not have to deal with any long-term problems you may have to deal with if you subconsciously use repression in the past.
I don't think I've used any defense mechanisms to help me go over PTSD.
That's totally fine because in your explanation, you said the imagery rehearsal therapy helped you deal with PTSD. Everybody uses different ways to cope with their problems in their everyday lives. That's all for this week's podcast about psychological disorders. Thanks for watching. This week's podcast was sponsored by Bell Let's Talk. This is an amazing initiative by Bell Canada to raise awareness and money for Canadians who are living with mental disorders. Stay tuned for next week's podcast where we take a trip to a psychological clinic and meet many patients with different mental illnesses. Make sure to share and subscribe to our podcast. I thank you all for listening.